Welcome, everybody. We're going to call this week Love Your Body Week.
And for some people, that's hard.
Well, it's really hard.
Yeah.
If you're a shrimp like I am. So, I mean, that was sort of an issue my whole life.
But that's the misconception. People think that if you are this or if you are that, it's harder to love your body. That's not true. Some of the people who are the hardest on themselves are attractive women. So, because they're so over-focused on every single detail. Why are you staring at me?
Because you're beautiful. Why would you ever? Although it's hysterical. When Tana and I first met, I took her to a conference of a friend of mine, Byron Katie, and there were like 300 people in this tent, and Katie was talking about body image, and she had everyone write down their thoughts about their body.
It was wild.
I didn't know what Tana wrote, and someone who was in the back, who was probably 300 pounds,
and much older than I was,
talking about how much she hated her body. And why don't you tell the story?
So what was so wild to me, at that time in my life, there's no way I was going to get up and share. And yes, I had a lot of body image issues growing up and through various times in my life, like probably most women. But it was pretty significant at that time. And so I wrote a bunch of stuff because it was the exercise and I wanted to participate, and, if you can deal with something, deal with it. But I'm laying down and I'm not really looking at anyone. I was up in the front with you. And all of a sudden I hear this woman start to talk, and I can tell by her voice that she's significantly older than I was. And so I turn around, and what made me turn around, though, was that her list was virtually identical to mine. I'm like, what is going on? When I turned around, she was much older, and she was very obese. And I was like, I'm so confused. Like, her list is identical to mine. And she suffered from all the same thoughts, all the same everything. And that was so eye-opening for me. But the really wild part was, I loved when Byron Katie said, and the woman was really in a lot of pain because her husband had left her for someone young and beautiful. And so her idea became that she needed to look younger and be thinner and be beautiful in order to get a man, get her husband back or get a different man or whatever. But that's what men wanted. And so that's what she needed to be. And so Byron Katie said, so wait a minute, you don't want to do that because you want to be healthy. You want to be thin and beautiful and young so you can manipulate men. And it was just so eye-opening. But the part that was the most wild for me is, and I couldn't help myself. At that time, I never would speak in public. That was just not my thing. But I stood up and I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, I'm a size 2. And what you're saying, your list is virtually identical to mine. I'm younger than you are. And oh, by the way, I have news for you. My marriage still fell apart. So we have the same problems. We have the same problems, the same thoughts, pretty much the whole thing was the same. And it was pretty crazy. And that's when it struck me. This is not an external problem. This is an internal problem.
So, who's considered probably the most iconic, beautiful woman of the last century killed herself? Marilyn Monroe.
I know Marilyn Monroe.
Right.
And she was curvaceous. She would have been chunky by our standards today.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of guys that like how she looked.
Absolutely.
Right?
She was gorgeous.
So the Twiggy thing often doesn't work.
And it
for a lot of people.
It's not realistic.
And it's not healthy.
No. Being too thin is equally unhealthy as being overweight.
So how do we get people listening to begin to assess their feelings about their body and love their body?
So
because
I really
we call this Love Your Body Week. And according to one study I read, 93% of girls hate their bodies.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. And by 9 years old, a study done in South Carolina, they said that by 9 years old, most girls have been on a diet and 10% of them had tried vomiting. That's just crazy. So, but I mean, we always look at it from 4 circles. It's not always just psychological. Sometimes there's hormonal imbalances, certainly puberty. All these studies in front of me show that puberty, they all say the same thing. Puberty is when it peaks. Puberty is when it's the hardest, especially for girls. It happens for boys too, but it's worse for girls. And that's when body shaming really starts, and girls are vicious at that age. And now we have this whole new thing. There's one study here I love. It says, Instagram is the worst social media app for young people's mental health. And it's...
Why is that?
Because there are so many... All the pictures are perfect. All the pictures are perfect. There's so many models on there. Even the food is perfect. Everything on there, you post it because it's perfect, right? You want to post these really cool pictures. You're trying to get a following. And so these girls are all comparing themselves. And I know Chloe she came home one day when she was in 7th grade, and she was really started struggling. And that was the first I had seen that of her. She came home and she was just like really struggling because she was, coming into puberty. And as usually happens, girls put on a little bit of weight during that time, which is what happens when you're trying to create hormones, when your body's trying to like change hormonally. And so she was pretty freaked out by it. And so we had a long talk, and fortunately, sadly, but I guess for her sake, good. I have a lot of experience in body image issues. So I really sat down and I just had a brutally honest talk with her about this. And she immediately started comparing herself to other people. Immediately. And that's what Instagram does. She was comparing herself. And I said, sweetheart, we need to like really help you understand something very clearly. Supermodels don't even look like supermodels. And she was like, what are you talking about? I said, in my day, it was called airbrushing. Okay. And it was not only common, it was sort of, you had to do it to make everything look perfect. In your day, it's much easier. You can do it on your phone yourself. There are apps to make yourself look thinner, apps to make yourself look prettier, apps to get rid of wrinkles, it's now everyone's making everything perfect. And then recently they were busted. So recently there was a big bust on all these models and all these people who looked perfect all the time. And you can actually see, because if you're really paying attention to the photos, they're distorted, where they made themselves look thinner. And so she's like, oh my God, you were right. So one of the things, the exercises that I love, and I jump in and chime in here on this, but was the exercise that I did where we actually just were brutally honest in a mean way, the same way that, and I realized, like, I didn't even realize how meanly I talked about myself sometimes, but we wrote down everything we hate about our bodies. And then we did the turnaround. The 4 questions. Is it true? Is it absolutely true?
So let's teach people that, because this is so important. And I find myself in my office with patients doing it all the time when they come out with negative thoughts about their relationship, about their job, or about their body. Mm-hmm. And so what's a common negative thought?
Well, my gosh, there are so many. Are you kidding me? I'm too fat. I'm not good enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not pretty enough. I have too many wrinkles. For me, one of the ones I discovered that I wasn't really that aware of until I did this exercise, I had so much resentment toward my body for sort of betraying me. So towards myself for betraying me and sort of ruining my whatever, I don't even know now because I'm so past that. But at the time I was really angry about it. And
did you have, and I actually don't know the answer to this question, so I'm going out on a limb here. Did you have resentment toward men for only wanting you for your body?
That was mixed. That was very mixed because I was also smart enough to know that yes, men are automatically going to be attracted to pretty women, to women who take the time to groom themselves. They just are. I mean, we know that. That's a fact. At the same time, it's an evolutionary thing. But at the same time, women are taught to use it. So you can't just be mad. And there was a time, probably periods where I was, because I had been asked out several times by married men, husbands of people that were friends of mine, and that really irritated me. Okay. So I got really bitter and angry at one point. But then I started to realize, women are taught. Just like you guys are taught something very different from what we are taught to use things a certain way. And I really realized, like, if I'm ever going to get past this, I have to take responsibilty for it.
Okay. So let's go with a thought that you hate about your body.
At the time that we did the exercise, I was starting to, just at that age where I was starting to get wrinkles. And it was pissing me off. So I did not like it. So I'd always sort of looked younger than my age. Now all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I'm starting to look my age now. Like, what's going on? And
so what's the thought that was torturing you?
I look old.
I look old.
Yeah.
Okay. So here are the questions,
I won't
everybody.
be pretty. I won't,
Write them down. Unless you're driving, then please don't write them down. Just listen to this again when you're not driving. I look old.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question is that true? And
I
the
said
idea
yes.
behind this is not positive thinking. So
No,
neither
no.
Tana
Be
and I are
brutally
fans
honest.
of positive thinking. We're fans of honest thinking. The second question is, can you absolutely know it's true?
Well, of course not, because compared to who? So, George Burns? I mean, who am I comparing it to?
The young people listening don't know who Johnny
Okay,
Burns
well,
is.
he
Isn't
lived to
that
be
horrible?
100. Okay, so.
I know, it just breaks my heart. Okay, so the first question is it true? Yes. The second question is, can I absolutely know it's true I look old? Compared to what? So, no. Or I don't know. The third question, I love this question, is how do you feel when you believe the thought, I look old?
Angry, helpless to change it, because we're aging. There's nothing you can do, right?
Well, there's all sorts of things, as we see.
Yeah, but that opens
these
up a
terrible
whole nother.
pictures.
But right, that opens up a whole nother can of worms. And I actually thought about doing that. I actually thought about doing my eyes, but we're going to talk about that later.
Okay.
All
right. So how do you feel when you believe I look old?
So angry, very helpless to change anything, because it's going to happen whether I can control it or not. I can't control it, whether I like it or not. So angry, helpless, resentful, and that's where the issues with men come in, I think, because men only like young, beautiful women. So that's another thought you have to work on. Sad, depressed, just
Panicked?
ugly.
Panicked? So you
Yeah, a little
end up
panicked.
doing things that maybe are not smart. Not
Right.
just, I'm not talking about you.
In general, people do,
but
right?
in
Panicked.
general. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to pay attention for a thought that is not absolutely true. It drives you to feel awful. And the fourth question, so first one is it true? The second one, can I absolutely know it's true? The third one is, how do I feel when I believe the thought I have? The fourth one is, who would I be or how would I feel if I didn't have that thought?
Yeah, this is my favorite. If I could not think that thought, some people have a hard time with this because they'll always go, but. No, you can't say but. Who would you be if you never were able to think the thought? I would be peaceful. I would be free. I would be happy with myself. I would not care what people thought, right? I would be happy. So generally just free, happy, peaceful.
Yeah. Plus, people aren't thinking about you anyways.
They're thinking about
We
themselves,
talk
right.
about the 18-40-60 rule. When you're 18, you worry about what everybody thinks of you. When you're 40, you don't give a damn what anybody thinks about you. And when you're 60, you realize no one has been thinking about you at all.
Right.
And then after you do the 4 questions, the last thing you do is you turn it around
Right.
to its opposite. So what's the opposite of I look old?
I don't look old.
I don't look old. Right. Don't go to narcissism, which is I look beautiful. No, that's not what this
Although you
exercise-
can do that if you feel
Right,
like you
but
need
what
to-
I try to get my patients to do is like, let's just go to the opposite. And the opposite just is like, put don't in. I don't look old.
And you need to come up
And-
with truth to support that.
Okay.
So they can be the tiniest. This is where people struggle too, because they're like, well, but so-and-so said I look old. No. They can be tiny. Okay, so you looked good, a month ago when you went to your sister's wedding shower or baby shower or whatever. And when you showed up, someone took a picture of you, you looked amazing and people commented on it. Like, it can be small. Like that day you looked good, you felt good about yourself. Whatever. It can be something small like that. Find some verification.
So question the thoughts about your body and you won't be tortured as much. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do the right things for your body. Mm-hmm.
But you need to come up with 3 turnarounds too.
So the turnaround is to the opposite, I don't look old. And then this is actually not to another person because you're doing it to yourself. What else do you think?
So I don't look old. You can say I look youthful. So that would be one of them. I look youthful, and that's where you would go, well, I do feel youthful when. Like, give yourself some way to support that. When do you feel young? When you're playing with your kids, when you're, probably not when you're looking at Instagram. So, right? So when you're playing with your kids, when you're doing things that make you happy, when you feel satisfied with your life somehow, you probably feel more youthful. So,
And that's the trap. That's why the social media has bred depression in teenage girls, because they're constantly comparing themselves to other people. And whenever you compare yourself and you don't measure up, your self-esteem just plummets. So if I compared myself to someone who won a Nobel Prize, and because I haven't won a Nobel Prize, then that means, well, I'm no good. Mm-hmm. Or if I was into money and I'm like, well, I'm not as rich as Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos, therefore I'm poor, right? I mean, it's insane, because there will always be somebody better than you, whatever you're comparing it to. There will always be somebody worse than you. The question is, do you love you for
well, a lot of people
who you
don't
are?
initially.
Well, and that's where these questions can be so helpful.
So one of the tricky parts is if you've got teenagers or you've got grandkids, they're struggling so badly right now with this. And girls can be vicious. I mean, the whole mean girl syndrome peaks when girls are going through puberty. It's when it's the most vicious. The body
7th,
shaming
8th,
happens.
9th grade.
Yeah, it's bullying happens over
In
body
fact,
issues.
14 years, 14.4. So that's like 14 years and 5 months. Meanness in teenagers peaks. So that's the worst time, according to a new study.
And there's several studies here that were just really interesting to me. One of them actually talks about, it's very different the way they talk about it, but I really liked it. There's a study, it was actually posted in Science Daily, Writing Away the Body Image Blues. And I like it because it's a little different than what we just did, the exercise, which I find very powerful. What they did is they wrote a letter to themselves as though it were coming from a friend who loves them, someone who adores them. And so it couldn't, they're not going to write them, because if they talk negatively to themselves, but they write this letter as though from the perspective of someone who adores them. And so who loves them. And writing it out somehow, like the improvement was incredible. So that was one that I really liked. This one I really love. So if you're older, or even if you're younger, body image strongly linked to overall life satisfaction. And I have certainly found that to be true. So it always has been the worst in my life when I've gone through stressful periods where I'm not feeling satisfied. So finding a way to ground yourself, that's why I love meditation and prayer so much, because finding a way to ground yourself, and one of the exercises that I do with that, and have always done with that, is when I'm feeling frustrated about something physically, like when my energy was not working well after I had surgery recently. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And you start to get frustrated and you start to like turn on yourself a little bit. And so like my automatic thought that popped in my head is, I'm just being lazy. Okay, well, how dumb is that? But I just had major surgery.
Is that true? Can you absolutely know?
So,
it's
right,
true?
it was the dumbest thought.
How do you feel when you believe that thought? I torture myself, and then I torture my husband.
I torture everybody, yeah. So, because I hate
Who would I
laying in
be
bed.
without the thought?
Hate laying in bed.
I just lay in bed.
But one of the things I do is I pray and I meditate on, literally I scan my body and I thank my different organs. And there's something about that I love.
You are just hysterical.
Why?
You are just hysterical. I'm lazy. Healing from major surgery.
So I really like that. And one of the things I really like for dealing with teenagers, especially girls that are really struggling with this, going through puberty, is doing the things that we've learned as adults, but took us 40 years. But start them really young. Educate them about the truth of what's going on with Instagram. Educate them about the importance of loving their bodies and taking physical care of themselves without becoming overly obsessed. And helping them to understand, put more value on other things. So that's what we've done with Chloe, is really help her put value on other things.
Well,
does this have eternal value?
And help them correct their negative thoughts, because if you don't do it when they're teenagers, they will take their the automatic negative thoughts, with them into adulthood. Many of us, even 40 or 50 years later, are still carrying around the negative thoughts that popped up when we went through puberty.
It's so true. We don't even realize it.
When we come back, we're going to talk about eating disorders. It's a really important topic to talk about. But we're also going to talk about how you can have the best body. I'm like totally vain. And I want to be in the same size jeans I was in when I was in high school. I don't want to be overweight. And so what's the balance?
But you struggled with that a little bit.
between, oh, I hate it. I hated
Yeah.
it when I couldn't be at the weight I wanted. So I don't want people to get to the don't worry, be happy part of where you don't care anymore about your body. I want you to be really serious about doing the right things. And, oh, by the way, you'll be cuter. Stay with us.
So we are back. We are talking about Love Your Body Week, and today we're gonna talk about some heavy subjects, eating disorders, and these are very painful for people who have them. Really hard, a lot of stigma attached to it, a lot of shame, and we really want to end that. I mean, we've done several things now on it because it's such a big topic.
So we're going to talk about bulimia and anorexia. In the next segment, we're going to talk about obesity. But there are other eating disorders like nighttime eating disorders, and you don't want to eat late at night. There's a dipper complex. If you eat 2 hours before bed, your blood pressure doesn't dip. So normally, say you eat at 6 or 7 o'clock at night and you don't go to bed till 10 or 11, what happens is because you don't have a lot of food in your body, your blood pressure will drop. And that's healthy for you. For the non-dippers, which means they eat before bed and their blood pressure doesn't drop, they actually have a significant increased risk for heart attack and strokes because of the persistent high blood pressure.
Yeah.
A lot of people do that, especially they have carb snacks as a way to boost serotonin. They worry less, they feel better, they're medicating themselves with sugar or foods that quickly turn to sugar, but it's not helpful. There are other ways to increase serotonin. We actually make something at BrainMD called serotonin mood support that can be helpful. Exercise helps. Bright light in the morning is actually a study that shows it increases serotonin. So just a little bit on nighttime eating disorders. But anorexia is a potential lethal disorder.
Really, really bad.
Where people perceive their fat, even though they're emaciated, they're really thin.
They're literally starving their bodies.
They're literally starving
essential nutrients.
And because they are starving their body, they don't think rationally. And in many ways, I almost think of it like a psychotic disorder because it's not rational at all. On their scans, we see that the front part of their brain works way too hard. And once they get a thought in their head, I'm too fat, whether it's rational or not, they can't let it go. It's like they have a little mouse on an exercise wheel in their brain, and the mouse just goes over and over and over, I'm too fat, even though there's not evidence of that.
So one thing I want to make sure that we do is cover this from the 4 circles, because I know I struggled a lot with body image when I was young. Struggled for some time, actually a short period, because I was smart enough to get help, but with an eating disorder in my teenage years. And unlike a lot of people who go through this like forever. But what happened was I noticed that for me, it was an anxiety issue. So it wasn't as much, because I never really had a weight problem. It was not as much about that as it was like this anxious feeling, like control almost.
And that's one of the psychoanalytic theories about anorexia. It's I can't control anything else in my life, but I can control this.
Yeah, it wasn't the feeling behind it. This was more like a stress relief type of like, I can't, like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like pressure. And so I think it's really important.
Which goes more with bulimia, where that anxiety and the release can be taking diuretics or taking laxatives or making yourself throw up. And
yeah, right, wrong, or indifferent, I actually figured out that I loved intense exercise. So I sort of transferred but that was better than hurting myself.
Well, and intense exercise also, like nighttime eating, raises serotonin in the brain and actually works as an antidepressant.
Right.
And so, but yes, that's one way to expel the energy.
Let me talk about what happened with when I was a kid. So I was really struggling. Of course, it was going through puberty. It was those years we talked about in the last episode. It was during that time. And I grew up in a pretty stressful household, like chaotic, not a little bit, but a lot of it. But I had a really cool mom. She just was busy and not there. But I was able to talk to her about this. Sadly, she freaked out a little bit, but because she loved me so much. But I remember her taking me to UCLA to their clinic there, and I walked in, and within 10 minutes of me being there, I'm waiting for the person to come in. She comes in, she gets a page, and there's a code blue. And I'm like, what the heck? I'm a kid, right? So I'm like, what is going on? And everybody takes off running. And she comes back, and apparently one of the girls who was in the facility went into cardiac arrest. That's all it took for me. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to find a different outlet for my anxiety. Like, it scared me. So it was a little like my uncle doing heroin, right? That scared me so badly, I knew I was never going to do drugs. That's, for whatever reason, that was enough for me.
So your crazy environment growing up, you learned from it, so
Yeah.
you didn't have to repeat it.
Right. I never knew that it was dangerous. And I think that's one of the key points, is make sure kids know how dangerous it is. I had no idea you could die from something like that.
So we talked about anorexia and how 10% of people who have that die. There's also bulimia, where you have periods where you take in a lot of calories. I mean, sometimes 4,000 or 5,000 calories at a time. Now, when we have places like the Cheesecake Factory, it's not that hard.
Oh my God.
And then you feel awful about it, and then so you eliminate it, whether it's through vomiting, laxatives,
Right.
exercise, whatever. And then, which is what, I often say in my new book, Feel Better, Fast, and Make It Last, coming out in November, I talk about you have to be very careful what you allow your brain to do, because whatever you allow it to do, it's likely to do it again. And then the behavior almost can become habitual.
Mm-hmm. So what I really like about how we do things here, I think it's so important, because what I learned when I was doing it, I was young. So this was a long time ago. And they really focused on the psychological aspect, which is fine. Okay. But they really over-focused on that, in my opinion. They didn't focus on any of the other stuff. And it was, okay, well, you live in a crazy environment, or you live by the beach and you're always in a bathing suit, or I don't know. It was always that kind of stuff. It was your thinking. It was your mom. What was your mom doing? And I'm not saying that is not important, but I have since done so much, research on this and looked into this because of what we do. And now we know it's not just that. There's the biological component, your hormones, your leptin and your ghrelin, but also things like somatostatin and CCK. If those are out of balance.
Now you just lost.
Okay,
everybody.
let me just back up. You have hormones in your body.
So let's start with, when Tana says we take a 4-circle approach, absolutely true. There's a biological component to eating disorders. There's a psychological component. There's a social component. Who are you hanging out with? And there's a spiritual component. Why do you want to be healthy? Why do you care? What's your biggest sense of meaning and purpose? If your biggest sense of meaning and purpose is to be that model on Instagram, then, you're much more likely to develop an eating disorder.
Right, if that's your big purpose.
So it's looking at those 4 circles. So under biology.
So you have these hormones that are designed, some make you hungry and some make you feel full. Okay, so you can see where the problem is if those are out of balance. People who are obese, they have found that oftentimes those are very out of balance. The ones that make them feel full are low. The ones that make them feel full are high. With anorexia, they actually also found that there's somatostatin, which is a hormone that makes you feel full. Like after you eat, you get this feeling like, okay, I've had enough to eat. Theirs was so out of balance, so high, that if they took a bite, they would get that feeling. And so you can see where the problems are. So it's not just all psychology. There are issues biologically.
So knowing that can be so helpful. Plus, here's a little secret. I call it practical neuroscience. If your vitamin D level is low, the hormone leptin that tells you to stop eating doesn't work anymore, and you're hungry all the time. So if we think of for bulimics who, they desperately want to be at 105 pounds, even though they're 5'7", but because they don't go out into the sun, because the dermatologist, they made us afraid of the sun, and their vitamin D level is really low. They're hungry all the time, and so they can't properly balance their appetite.
Really important. And then there is, you already mentioned the social circle, who you hang out with.
Well, let's do a little bit more on biology.
Okay.
Because genetics are really important.
Yeah.
So what runs in your family? Do you have a tendency to be anxious? Do you have a tendency to be depressed? Do eating disorders run in the family? Did you have a head injury? So common. So the imaging studies on anorexia, the ones I've done, their frontal lobes work too hard. Mm-hmm. With bulimics, they have this pattern we call impulsive compulsive. So part of their frontal lobes works too hard. It's called their cingulate gyrus. So they worry, they hold grudges, things don't go their way, they get upset. But another part of their frontal lobes, the underside, doesn't work hard enough. Mm-hmm. So they're impulsive. They can't control their impulses, but they get stuck. So they get stuck on a thought, and then they can't control it properly. And so I think of bulimia as the perfect impulsive compulsive disorder, and compared to anorexic, so they have like 300% increased risk of having ADD. Mm-hmm. So ADD has to be ruled out. With bulimia, it's actually fairly rare in anorexia.
So they're almost the
Anorexias are more like OCD.
Yeah. Do you remember with Chloe, she has a very busy brain, and she was struggling with body image during that time, and we scanned her and her brain was super overactive. She used to she didn't have anorexia. She liked to eat, but she was so controlled. It was a little worrisome how much she controlled her food. And I was like, wow, that's not normal control. That's like some serious control there. And once we balanced her, she stopped doing that. Like she literally stopped doing it.
Yeah, and she still makes good choices.
Really good by choice now.
But it's
not a compulsion.
Not obsessive.
Right.
Right. Okay. And then the social circle. So how does that show up in, and this is not, let's just be super clear. Eating disorders are not teenage disorders, right? I mean, they often start in adolescence, but there are a lot of 50-year-old people that have eating disorders.
So, and even with me, those feelings that I described, like that anxious feeling, 2 other times in my life, they popped up. Fortunately, I'm able to recognize them so I could get it under control really quickly. After I had cancer, and I had no control over anything in my life, and after my divorce, when I felt the same way. I felt sort of hopeless and out of control, and I felt that same intense lack of control and that anxiety coming up. And fortunately at that stage, I have more to work on it for, and I understood and recognized it. So you can figure it out. But if you don't recognize it and you don't see it coming.
So if you're struggling with an eating disorder, or you have a child or a loved one who is, it's really this 4-circle approach to understanding it, but then let's also talk about, what to do about it in a biopsychosocial spiritual way.
Well, you mentioned the social part, and I think that's really important because we do live in a place where the value on looks and name brands and everything is so high. So trying to do something to counter that and keeping your child connected to something that is more important, whether it's volunteering, doing mission work, church, whatever it is for you, that gives them a different perspective to realize that is not the end all in the world. And I'm just really clear that this whole Instagram issue is a problem. So that's the social.
My name brand is Hollister. It's so soft. The sweatshirts are $39.
I do admit to Lululemon because I wear gym clothes like 90% of the time, but that is my downfall.
All right. So from a biological, and you do this beautifully, is you teach people how to eat right. Because often when you have anorexia or even bulimia,
you can make it worse.
That you are malnourished. And we're going to talk about that next time when we talk about obesity, that many obese people are actually malnourished. It sounds crazy.
But you brought up one thing that I can't let go. The way you eat, especially if you have a compulsive like that where you have to eat a lot, you can't stop it. How you eat can actually affect that. So I know there are a lot of therapists who teach like there's no bad food, and I'm like, I'm not sure about that. There's no bad whole real foods. But when we're talking about processed foods that are made with chemicals and they're designed literally to make you addicted, that's not true. And if you're eating certain foods, you are actually doing to your hormones what we talked about before. You are with those foods, putting them out of balance, and that will make you hungrier. So there are foods that can make it worse.
So when your blood sugar is low, you're much more likely to make a bad decision with food, which you'll then want to throw up. I have a great example. So I was treating this 23-year-old woman who had bulimia, and she did really well. We were having her journal and chart her progress, and she had 3 weeks where she did great. But then one day she didn't eat at work, and she went out to a restaurant to meet her friends. So she hadn't had anything to eat for like 12 hours. And the first thing they did was order drinks. She had a drink. What does alcohol do?
Drops your frontal lobes.
Drops your frontal lobes.
Makes you more impulsive.
And then she didn't order the nachos, but one of her friends did, ordered the nachos. She started eating it, and then she ate too much, and then she felt full, and then she went into the bathroom and made herself throw up.
And this is common.
And if you go, oh, well, you shouldn't have eaten the nachos, it's like, no, it starts way before that. So it's not eating to go into a vulnerable situation, restaurant, alcohol, bad food, and no blood sugar, so low blood sugar, and then the alcohol, which dropped her frontal lobes further. So if she just would have ate something healthy before she went, that could have helped prevent this whole chain. And so people go, oh, well, we have to stop the vomiting. It's like, no, you have to get that chemistry right.
Root cause.
To when you go into vulnerable
because,
situations.
oh, by the way, the day before, if she'd eaten something processed, heavily processed with a lot of chemicals, that set her up too. So, and people don't realize that.
Really?
Yes.
You're so smart.
That's why it annoys me.
Because you're so smart.
It irritates me.
All right, so you got to get the biology right. And another thing I've heard you teach girls to do is you got to eat right most of the time, because when you nourish your body, your brain works better. And so think of a plate, 70% plant-based foods, 30% high-quality protein, lots of healthy fat mixed in, and you're going to think better and make better choices.
And feel full.
If you're,
FYI, you will feel full.
If you're nourished. And then, of course, you want to get your important numbers checked. You want to check your thyroid. You want to check your vitamin D level to make sure that your brain is as healthy as it can be. And then the psychological circle. The interventions, or whenever you feel vulnerable, start journaling, write down what you think. You don't have to believe every stupid thing you think. Mm-hmm. And if you hang out with people who have eating disorders, you're so much more likely to have
Or people who are over-focused on, and that's all that's important to them, is their looks. That's going to be a problem. If everything is about money, looks, partying, that's going to be an issue.
So we often say the fastest way to get healthy is just find the healthiest people you can stand and then spend as much time around them as possible. And then the spiritual circle, I find, is just so important.
So important.
Why are you on this planet?
And why is the world a better place because you breathe? I love that question that you always ask people. And does it have eternal value? And one thing that really, it's so different seeing Chloe now from Chloe when she doesn't go to the public. We don't really like the schools in our area. It's a long story. But anyways, we're happy to miss all that drama. So we homeschool her, but we keep her involved in a lot of social activities. And she got really involved in the leadership program, the student leadership program at church. And the level of purpose that she feels, and that is purposeful. That's important.
There's less depression when you feel purposeful. There's less anxiety when you feel purposeful. It doesn't mean there's none, but it's less. Because your focus is not on you, it's on how you can help others. And when you are outwardly focused, you are less obsessed about your body. Stay
Yep.
with us. Love Your Body Week. So now we're going to talk about obesity. This is so important. With 40% of Americans obese, 70% of Americans are overweight. I just think it's the biggest crisis that we have had in America. I published 2 studies that showed as your weight goes up, the size and function of the brain goes down. And it's just the biggest brain drain. And it's the whole reason why we call this podcast The Brain Warrior's
Right.
Way.
And I think it's really important as we go into this that we want, because we've been talking about body shaming and a lot of things, we don't want you to body shame yourself. We don't want you to hate yourself. And we are not doing this from a body shaming perspective. We always want you to focus on being the healthiest person you can be because you love yourself. You have a purpose on this planet and you want to be your best so you can do that. So this is not a shaming thing.
But I want you to have enough anxiety that you get serious about it. It's important. Now, being too thin is a problem.
Yes.
In fact, as you age, there's not that many obese people in their 80s and 90s. What really kills people in the elderly is frailty, right? I mean, you saw that as a nurse in the hospital.
A lot. Yeah.
But
not being able to recover.
But you're in a war for the health of your brain and your body. Tana and I talk about in our course, The Brain Warrior's Way, that the real weapons of mass destruction are highly processed, pesticide sprayed, high glycemic, low fiber, food-like substances stored in plastic containers that our food industry has killed way more people than ISIS has thought about. And we need to get serious. And so the idea behind the Brain Warrior's Way podcast is we want to help you be armed, prepared, and aware to win the fight of your life.
Right.
And you see commercials nonstop on TV for Jenny Craig and Nutrisystems and Weight Watchers. And I think all of them sort of miss the boat. You just have to get the packages and read the labels for the packages. And they're loaded with pro-inflammatory ingredients.
Which will ultimately make it worse.
Plus, I think you taught me that if you keep the yo-yo dieting thing, you're actually decreasing the set point of calories in your body so that you can just be eating 800 calories a day and still not.
Yeah, you just yo-yo dieting trashes your metabolism.
Metabolizing things like you want. So in this podcast, what we want to do is really go over, well, what are the rules of brain healthy eating, and also talk a little bit about the types.
Right.
I think that's one of the unique things I've contributed to the world of overeating. Everybody's not the same.
Right. What motivates them isn't the same.
Well, that we have
what drives them.
Impulsive overeaters. It's really our attention deficit disorder group. They have low frontal lobe activity, and they don't think about food all the time, but as soon as they pass a Jack in the Box, they're like, oh, I've got to get this or that sandwich or this or that shake or whatever. They don't have good impulse control, and fixing their ADD makes a huge positive difference for them. There are compulsive people where they have that little mouse on an exercise wheel in their head and they can't get off, and they get the same thought over and over again. They walk by the refrigerator and the ice cream's screaming to
and they
them.
go sit down. They're like, I'm not going to do it. And they go sit down and they're doing something else. But in the back of their head, it's just like constantly repeating.
Right. And then there's impulsive, compulsive people that they have traits of both. And then there are the sad overeaters and the anxious overeaters. So you want to know what your brain type is. And you can go to our free brain health assessment at amenclinics.com, and it'll tell you what brain type you are. And then, there are supplements and behavioral exercises for each type. But ultimately, to get your weight under control, you, one, have to care about your brain. You have to go, I am not going to. That's how I lost the weight. I mean, like you said before.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a minute because, we don't want people to think, oh, we're just perfect and we've got all the answers. When I met you, you were frustrated. So talk to them about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
genetically,
I hadn't published the study yet.
But you also have genetics that set you up.
My genetics say I should be fat, and my dad's was overweight. My brother's morbidly obese. I have a sister who's morbidly obese. So these genes run in families, and the most I've ever been overweight is about 30 pounds. But I'm like, why am I fighting this?
But 30 pounds on your frame is significant. I mean, it's uncomfortable.
It's like, why am I fighting this all the time? It's just irritating. And when I published those two studies that show as your weight went up, the size of your brain went down, I'm like, oh no.
But the first thing you did is made sure because you said when you started taking vitamin D, it actually helped.
My appetite went away.
Right.
I mean, and I checked vitamin D, the healthy level is 30 to 100. Mine was 17.
And some simple nutrients really helped.
So taking vitamin D really helped. Being married to you really helps because we both have the
same mission and the same goals,
values around food. And we're not perfect.
No,
but we're really good.
We don't try to be perfect. We focus on what's important to us.
And being healthy is really important. And so over the years together, we've developed our food rules, which is number one, it's really high quality food. So I think calories really do matter. Calories are like money, but the quality of your calories matters more.
Yes.
Right? So you can go on an 800 calorie a day Twinkie diet and you will lose weight, but you'll be inflamed. You'll
start to gain it back.
It's not right.
Once the inflammation creeps up to a certain point, you begin your metabolism, your hormones get out of balance, and you start to put weight back on.
But if you've chronically had problems with your weight, I know for me, when I gain 5 pounds, actually, for me, it's 3, and
me too. My window is 3.
On my phone, I start counting my calories. I know exactly how much I have in the morning. I know the calories in the almond milk cappuccino I make for 10 every morning. I don't like overspending, and even though we have plenty of money, when I'm at home and I see lights on, it just irritates me. And I hate wasting money. I hate wasting calories because I know they're the currency my body uses to live and to be healthy, and I'm not going to overspend. So that's principle number 1.
So, and I want to point something out. So I've helped a lot of people through this process because based on what you just said, I've helped people lose more than 100 pounds doing this. And they all acknowledge the same thing. And I always tell people it's going in, they don't believe me, but it ends up being true and they love it. When you eat the way we're trying to teach you to eat, like in the Brain Warriors Way, the Brain Warriors Way cookbook, it's our principles for the clinic. You get to eat more, okay? Because that 800 calorie Twinkie diet is messing up your metabolism. It's making you hungrier. You're going to be inflamed and you're going to gain weight. When you eat really healthy, you actually will feel satisfied. You get to eat more and be healthy, but you won't be as hungry. That's the thing. And
that's true, but you can't be dumb.
No. When I say more, I'm not talking about 4,000 calories. 800, though, is not healthy. So that's my point. You get to eat a normal amount of calories. You'll feel satisfied and full, and you won't feel the need to go gorge on food once we get your hormones straightened out.
The second principle is you want to drink lots of water because when you're dehydrated, I just showed the Bill Phillips scan when Bill Phillips, famous bodybuilder, came to see us. He purposely dehydrated himself for a photo shoot and his brain just looked terrible.
Right.
And so you
there's a lot of
to
studies.
hydrate yourself because your judgment will be better. So drinking water throughout the day can be really helpful. I don't really like drinking water, so I created something for BrainMD called Brain Boost on the Go. That it tastes awesome, it's good for you, and it encourages me to drink water.
So two really important points that I want to make that make it sort of solidifies it for people, because I know I used to hear like, oh, drink water, it's good for you. I'm like, yeah, so what? It was sort of abstract. This like made a difference for me. One study showed that when you are hydrated, because I work out, so when you are hydrated, you are 19% more powerful. Like you are 19% stronger and more powerful. That's huge. That was one. I'm like, wow, that means I'm 19% less strong when I'm dehydrated. That was one. And I like being strong. And the second one was a study done on pilots. And when they were only 2% dehydrated, just 2%, their cognitive functioning was greatly affected. So
you want to give the pilot water
yes.
as you get on the plane. Go,
yes.
Here, hey, have an extra
Drink.
one. Here's drink up. The third principle is high quality protein at every meal, because protein helps to balance your blood sugar.
And this means even if you are vegan, you need to have high quality plant-based protein if you're vegan. And
protein is in vegetables, right? Mm-hmm. It's in spinach and broccoli.
You just have to eat a lot more of it, but that's okay because it's not high calorie. So.
And when we say high quality protein, we generally mean hormone-free, antibiotic-free,
free range,
fed, free range, if you can afford it.
But we want you eating less of it anyways. We want you eating more of a plant-based diet. We don't want 50% of your diet to be like processed meats. That's just not healthy. I don't care how you look at it. So we'd rather you cut back to a smaller percentage of really high quality protein and increase your plants.
So you're saying it's the same cost. So if you eat half the amount, but it's twice the cost, it's the same cost. And
cut out a Starbucks and see what happens. I did the math with my daughter. We were trying to budget. And I'm like, do you realize that if you and I, because we're on the road a lot, so it gets really easy to stop at a Starbucks like several times a day, get an iced tea, whatever. And I'm like, do you realize that if we give up one drink a day, we decided to do this. We together made the decision to do this. One time a day, we're going to not do that. And so we'll figure out another solution. We'll bring something or whatever. It's $300 a month between the two of us.
Wow.
One time a day for the two of us for the month. $300. That's crazy. So I can help you budget.
Well, please do that. I'd be so grateful.
We did.
I'm so
We've
grateful.
been doing it.
The fourth one is healthy fat. Neither of us are fan of low-fat diets because 60% of the solid weight of your brain is fat. And so healthy fat, avocados, nuts and seeds, green leafy vegetables have healthy fat in them.
So I have a really good story. So someone I was talking to up in LA recently, she like recognized this. She's like, oh my gosh, I want to get your book. And we started talking about food. Her husband had a widowmaker heart attack and lived through it, which is just crazy. It's like a really big heart attack.
I thought he was married to someone.
Oh, stop
that
it.
was really
So
hard
anyways, he survived it. And so they put him on a really strict diet and he followed it because it was serious. He followed it. He lost a ton of weight but he was eating zero oil. Zero fats and oils. And his cholesterol got down to 110. And all of a sudden, he not only felt frail, but he started to get depressed, like seriously depressed and anxious.
And under 160 is associated with homicide, suicide, depression, and death from
I'm like, you need to read our book.
So you need some. Definitely
but not
need.
Processed fat.
So healthy fat. Fat was demonized in the late 70s and early 80s, and it stayed that way, and the incidence of obesity just skyrocketed.
Well, and they were trying to get rid of the unhealthy fats, and that you should do, but you should not get rid of. They're called essential fatty acids for a reason. You need them.
And when we studied our patients at Amen clinics, 98% of them were low in omega-3 fatty acids. I mean, it's just crazy. So, and then carbs are not the enemy. You know, everyone goes low carb, low carb, low carb. It's low bad carbs. The carbs are they're filled with medicine, plant-based medicine, things called phytonutrients.
Yeah. They're like little anti-cancer agents.
But we really would prefer you to limit or eliminate sugar, bread, pasta, potatoes, and rice, because those quickly turn to sugar in your body, but really ramp up on colorful vegetables, low glycemic fruit. That means fruit that doesn't quickly raise your blood sugar, like dates are off the chart. Bad for you when it comes to sugar. Their sugar content's just so high. And then we want you to eat clean. Clean is important. And then use spices like medicine, like cayenne pepper increases blood flow to the brain, rosemary increases blood flow to the brain, turmeric has anti-inflammatory properties. And Tana talks about all of this in the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook.
The cookbook is loaded with information.
None of this is hard. And ultimately, it's about love. And, both Tana and I, in the past, we've been in bad relationships. Thank God this has been the best 12 years of my life being with her. But I'm damn sure not going to be in a bad relationship with food. Something that I can control. That I am not going to be in love with any food that does not love me back.
Yeah, no, I have a funny story about this. So after having surgery, I started to get a little wonky and get a little down because I'm used to pretty intense exercise and being busy. And a few weeks after being down, I'm just like, okay, I'm done with this. Like I had brain fog and I didn't feel good and I was tired. And so I started to notice I was getting a little lazy with my diet. Now, for most people, that would still look pretty clean, still gluten-free and whatever. But I was being lazier, eating some gluten-free bread and pastas and things like that. And my daughter walks in the kitchen one day and she goes, I have a goal for you. And I'm like, what's that? She goes, you have to live to be 100. And I'm like, what? Somehow it was like a slap in the face to me that it really pointed out to me that I was being lazy. She goes, yeah, no, you have to take care of yourself because you have to live to be 100. I'm only going to be 65 then. And so I'm like, that... I'm not going to get into that. But anyways, it really was a slap in the face pointing out to me that, it is easy to fall into that rut. But when you're all of a sudden, my goal was the whole reason I do all this was put back in my face by her. It's like, why am I doing all this?
Why do you want to be healthy? Why do you want to be at a healthy weight? Why do you want to love your body and do the things for it as if you love it? For me, I love my wife. I'm madly in love with my wife. I love my children. I love my grandbabies. I have a new grandbaby.
Oh, she's so cute.
Who's 2 weeks old.
Oh, she's so cute.
And I love the mission we have at BrainMD and Amen Clinics. I love my life. I don't want to. And if you're not serious, I had a friend recently who was 61 years old,
sad.
And someone I just adored, and he had a massive heart attack and died. And the heartbreak for me, much worse for his wife and his children and his 600 patients. And it was because he wasn't as serious as he could have been.
People get complacent. They think it's not really going to happen to them.
They get in denial. So we have so many tools for you. If you take our brain health assessment to know your type, go to brainhealthassessment.com or amenclinics.com in the upper right-hand corner. Know your type. There's supplements to help your type. Tana has cookbooks. We have Brain
The
Fit
Brain Warriors Way
Life.
cookbook is great.
All of her recipes are on brainfitlife.com. You can also go to TanaAmen.com. We have all sorts of recipes to help you get healthy, to have a
and
better
make it
brain
taste good.
and a
It
better
doesn't
life.
have to be miserable.
There is no suffering
Yeah.
in getting well. People often go, well, was it hard? And they'll go, no, being sick was hard.
Right. And they don't realize it until they start to feel really a lot better. And then they're like, wow, I didn't realize you're miserable. Like Angie, who I helped, she knew she was miserable. She knew she had suffered persecution from being overweight. I helped her lose 103 pounds. She kept it off. Last I heard was 3 years and she was still doing great. And so she was suffering, but she didn't realize how much better she would feel physically. She thought it was going to be the psychological part she'd feel better, but her ailments cleared up. She had energy. She felt so good. And she's like, I didn't realize how bad I felt because I had never felt this good.
Food is medicine or it's poison. Stay with us. Use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or on our supplements at brainmdhealth.com. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook we give away every month.